So Pam, I got to know, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago by phone, by Zoom, and it's so nice to see her without being on our laptops. But welcome, Pam. So let me tell you a little bit about Pam. She has an incredibly diverse background, beginning with a degree in English and history, before training and working as a nurse. She later earned an MSc in health studies and pursued theological education at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford in 1998 to 2001. Alongside raising her family, she worked in parish ministry with her husband Phil, an Anglican priest. In 2008, she founded the Shroud of Turin exhibition, featuring life-size replicas by Barry Schwartz, using the Holy Shroud to illustrate the gospel story. The exhibition has traveled to various venues and is scheduled for St. George's R.C. Cathedral in London from March 12th to April 21st, 2025. Please welcome Pam. So good to have you.
Originally I was going to do one talk, and then I was given permission to do two. So I'm going to be looking at the folding patterns of the Shroud of Turin. Now this is an image that of the Shroud from Barry Schwartz. I bought a copy of the Shroud from Barry in 2008, and over the years I've spent a lot of time working out how it was folded to understand the different patterns. And today I'm going to talk to you about the medical and spiritual reflections from the different patterns, and partly from some of my observations about the nature of what happened to Jesus. So this is the exhibit in St. George's Cathedral in Southwark in London. I was at a Catholic conference last week, a fabulous thing called We Believe, and a young teenager came up to me and said, "Why don't people believe in the Shroud? It's there in black and white. It's there in black and white." And this is my husband, Phil, who Barry used to refer, he always used to say, "Give my best regards to the vicar." Here he is concentrating on folding the backing cloth that we use for the Shroud exhibition. Because Barry told me I didn't know how to display my Shroud, and he said, well, in New Zealand when they had an exhibition, they pinned it. So that's what I've been doing all these years. And we tend to fold it straight down the middle line first, and then across the centre. Now you wouldn't fold the Mona Lisa in half, would you? It's extraordinary that it is folded. Because what happens is that the adhesive, which holds the paint or the pigment, breaks down and the colour will flake away. So this is what the Shroud would look like if it was made from a paint or a pigment. Now this is a problem for medievalists because any dye or pigment, like ferrous oxide, will not adhere to the fibres. Linen doesn't accept dye well. You need to soak the material in alum and then apply the dye with gum tragacanth. Folding, fire and water makes it highly unlikely that the image would be undamaged. Okay, so let's have a look at the different damages to the Shroud. This is the fire damage from 1532. And you can see that the Shroud was folded, first of all, down the centre line, and then again down the line, and then across in multiple ways. This is the large lime diamond water paddle. You can see it. How do you work that's it. Is that, which is the, there we go. You can see it mainly in the centre of the chest here. Can you see this diamond shape? And you can see it above the head, this water damage. The largest is here. So that again, the Shroud is folded down the centre line, and then the marks of these as it went across. But the two, okay, so the large one, so the gentleman who was asking about above the head, a lot of people say to me that Jesus didn't have the top of his head because they think that the water stain is actually at the top of his head. It isn't. The Shroud, the back of the crown of thorns is further back. Next slide, please. So if you superimpose, next slide, please. The two patterns don't match. So the fire damage is at a different time to the water damage. So we have to try and understand when did this diamond pattern happen. I'll look about that in the next talk a bit more. Next, please. Next slide, please. I'm also going to talk about the possibility of water and bacterial damage, where the shroud was folded, first of all, down the centre, above the head of the man of the shroud. With my own folding cloth, I only ever do that when it's wet and I'm trying to dry it, and I fold it that way. If you look at the shroud, there are 2 corners present and 2 corners missing. Why is that? And I think there's a possibility it's water damage. Next slide, please. And this is the folding pattern for the incense damage. You can see that there's an L-shaped pattern of incense damage, and the fold went down the main line and then down the centre for that. And you can work out the sizes of those holes. Next, please. Okay, some basics about the shroud. The first thing I want to say is it's a colourblind image. We don't know the colour of his skin or his hair or his eyes. Okay, I said that once in a prison. And there were 2 men sitting, black men sitting on the second row. And when I said it, they kind of went, as if to say, I've been subject to racism all my life. But the God who created the Shroud of Turin does not discriminate based on the colour of your skin. Next one, please. Okay, it's nakedness without shame. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, 1 for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This is the second Adam, without sin. So he doesn't, in some ways his nakedness is without shame. But equally, he is not fully naked on the shroud, is it? Because his arms cover his dignity. The crucifix doesn't tend to show that, does it? It always puts a loincloth on Jesus by and large. Next one, please. Okay, the right cheek. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. So this is the first injury that Jesus suffered on the road to the cross, that he was slapped in the right face. Have a look at it on the shroud. Next, please. You can see there's a large bruise to the right cheek, and underneath it is a whiplash. The next, please. This is consistent with Jesus' teaching, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. This is someone who practiced what they preached. The next slide, please. Now, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used Jesus' teaching on non-violence to say that we should stand up against evil, but we should not respond with violence. Next one, please. Okay, the crown of thorns. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews." Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Next, please. So the crown of thorns, it runs down the hair in the front of the man of the shroud, and on the back of the head you can see a deep crown. Next one, please. But the number 3 blood stain on the centre of the forehead, why is it curved? Now, I ran a viscous liquid down my forehead because I've been told all along that it's about, if you run a viscous liquid down a furrowed brow, what you'll get is that shape. It doesn't happen. What you get is blood flowing along the lines of the furrow. So what causes this? Next one, please. Now, in 2014, Karen Jacks told me she thought that the shape of the Golden Gate was like the Golden Gate in Jerusalem, the gate where the Messiah would enter Jerusalem. And Russ Broad has argued that it's like the cursive Hebrew letter Sade, the righteous one. Next one, please. But I want to argue for something else. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. This is, sorry about the nature of the writing. This is in the Apocalypse Revelation. This is St. John writing about the nature of heaven. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. This is a witness to the shroud in the tomb, and this is what he's writing. Next, please. Now, if you look at the letter Shin in ancient Hebrew writing, look at the second line down to the right. You can see there's something that looks like a W in Hebrew from 2,000 years ago. Can you see that? At the conference I was at last week, I was talking about this when a Hebrew scholar walked past. It was amazing, the coincidence for that. Okay, the next one, please. Now, the letter Shin in Hebrew has enormous spiritual significance. It's the first letter of Shaddai, the name of God Almighty. The first letter of Shalom, the peace and the wholeness of God. It's the first letter of Shekinah, the glory and the presence of God. It's the first letter of the Shema, the law. And did anyone used to be Trekkies? Yeah? Okay, well, Leonard Nimoy based this symbol on Shin, because actually he looked while the priests were one day praying over the people, and this is the priestly blessing, to raise your fingers like this in the letter Shin over the people. Next one, please. It's written on the mezuzah, the container that the Jews write the law and put it on the doors. Next one, please. And the Jews believe, I will put my law within them, says God, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. They believe that Shin is written on the ventricles of the heart, and they also believe that it's like symbolic from the breasts that give life to a young baby. Next one, please. Now, in English, at a conference last year, somebody said to me, but you know what? It's the W, isn't it? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, English is the lingua franca of the world. I'm pushing my luck here, but never mind. Next one. The agony in the garden. So possibly this letter that's on the forehead of the man of the shroud is actually part of that. Being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Maybe that is the point at which this letter appears on his forehead. Next one, please. The flogging. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. There were hundreds of whiplashes, as Julia was saying this morning, 500 whiplashes. Next one, please. I want to look at this, the work of this artist, Lucas Cranach the Elder. This is his Christ as a man of sorrows. Now, he saw the shroud. This is dated to 1515. So he saw the shroud before it was damaged by fire. Okay? And you can see the muscle mass of the arms in a way that we can't see anymore because it's gone because of the fire. You can see the whiplashes run down the arms just as they did down the body. And you can see that it's like a dumbbell. He's drawn the whiplash to the right cheek. He's drawn the depth of the crown around the head. I think he's drawn the divided beard. Without question, I think Lucas Cranach the Elder saw the shroud. Okay, next one, please. So who was he? Who was Lucas Cranach the Elder? Well, he's a German Renaissance painter, contemporary of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. This is a self-portrait. Next one, please. He was the painter of the Reformation. So he's probably fallen out of favour a little with the Catholic Church. This is his drawing of Martin Luther. Next one, please. But he was also the court painter for the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I. And this, the man in the middle there, in the centre above Mary and Christ, is Maximilian II, the Holy Roman Emperor. And we know that Maximilian commissioned 2 replicas of the Holy Shroud. Next one, please. He was also, this is Cranach's drawing of Margaret of Austria, who was Maximilian's daughter. Now, she was married to the Duke of Savoy in 1501, and of course the Duke of Savoy was the owner of the shroud. Next one, please. So we see other works from Cranach, The Fall of Man, Christ as a Man of Sorrows. You can see that he understands the nature of whiplashes all over the body. Next one, please. And Christ as a Man of Sorrows with the Virgin and St. John, you can see he also begins to understand that there's a problem with the right shoulder. Next, please. And he drew multiple crucifixions on a T-shaped cross with an elongated long loincloth. His loincloth on Jesus was always really long in a shroud-like reflection. Next one, please. And the reason I'm talking about all of this is because of this. Now, this is the Lier shroud in the St. Gummerus in Belgium, in Lier. And was it done by Lucas Cranach the Elder? Because was this a copy commissioned by Maximilian I? I'd like to argue it was. It looks quite crude. It looks like it's not particularly well drawn, but I think it's Cranach. Next one, please. Why do I think that? Because he signed himself Elsie, and he had a motif which was a serpent. He was given that by one of the people he worked with, and he tended to write the date on his. So this image, could you go back one, please? This image Thank you. You can see he's picked out the L-shaped damage from the incense really beautifully. This is the only image we have that's accurate, to my mind, of what the shroud looked like before the fire. I'm going to come on to that later. Next one, please. Skip 2, please. Okay, crucifixion. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cloth, he went to the place of the skull, which is in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Next, please. Next, please. Sorry. Now, looking at the nature of crucifixion and how it worked, the nature of what happened to the Passion of Christ, I've been working with a doctor called Dr. Andrew Husselby, very eminent doctor in the parish where we lived, Oxford educated, and I argued at the Ancaster conference with Dr. Husselby that medial nerve damage does not cause the thumb to go into the palm of the hand. That's not the reason why there are no thumbs on the shroud. And at the BSTS conference, we argued for a yoke crucifixion. And that's what I'm going to try and do now. It's a bit out there, and you probably won't agree with me at all, but here we go. Next one, please. So why are there no thumbs on the shroud? Medial nerve damage does not cause the thumb to retract into the palm. Next one, please. This is a Harvard Health. It's carpal tunnel syndrome. It's called the ape hand deformity. So it paralyzes the thumb, so it cannot do that movement. Okay, next one, please. So what I've tried to argue with Andrew's help is that the hands were tied together underneath we can't see it because the thumbs are tied together. I've spoken to various people over the years, Coptic doctors and various other people who know what it is to bury within a shroud. And you want to keep the line of the body. You don't want an arm out here. Okay, so they tend to tie the hands together. We saw it with Lazarus. Next one, please. But it's also possible that there's a phylactery. In Jewish thought, fix these words of mine in your heart and minds, tie them as symbols to your hand, and bind them to your forehead. It's possible. This is a 1st century phylactery. It's basically the Shema, the law, written in a little leather pouch. It would be very easy to attach this to the back of the hand. We wouldn't see it, but it would be there. Next one, please. Now, I've argued for many years now that the Holy Blood of Bruges is that cloth that was used to tie the hands of Jesus together. It's been in Bruges for almost 1,000 years, and it is this is Janice Winchester's image of it. It's a beautiful linen cloth soaked in blood. The blood is the same colour as the shroud. Now, Jewish burial practices would mean that you wouldn't wipe the blood off the body of a victim of violent death. You just don't do that. You don't dislodge the blood, but you want to bury it all with it. So I think the possibility this is hands tied together like Lazarus it's a possibility. Next one, please. So let's have a look for a moment at the nature of crucifixion. This is Velasquez's beautiful image of crucifixion with the arms at 45 to 55 degrees. And the point of the crucifix is to tell us the story of the Passion. It's to tell us that Jesus opened his arms to the world to save us and to bring us to restoration with God. But it's not the only form of crucifix there is. Can you turn the next one, please? This is a Jansenist crucifix. And I'm not trying to mess with the crucifix. When I talked about this in Brood, I had to go to my parish priest and asked about it. And he said, this story, that the crucifix is just there to tell the story. It's not to accurately depict how Jesus was crucified. The Jansenist crucifix, they had the arms straight up in the air because they believed that only the elect were saved, and that was the message that they wanted to get out. Another one, please. Now, if you look at Pope Paul VI Ferula, which is carried here by St. John Paul II and Pope Leo XIV, aren't we blessed? You can see that they have a crucifix where the arms are at a different angle to the Jansenist, but they're still outstretched and upright. Next one, please. Now, this is a bit more controversial. This is the Lodwar Stations of the Cross in Kenya. Now, St. Peter and Paul said that Jesus died on a tree. Now that's been interpreted as, well, what they really mean is wood, but it's possible that Jesus did actually die on a tree. It's the easiest way. You don't have to have concrete, you don't have to put a stake in or anything like that. You use a pollarded tree. Maybe acacia, the wood used for the Ark of the Covenant, or an olive tree. I don't know. Next one, please. Now, these are artistic impressions of crucifixion in ancient art. You can see that there's a T-shaped cross, and in this instance, the cross beam is behind, the back is behind the man who's been crucified. Next one, please. In this graffiti, it's a T-shape again, the cross is in front. Next one, please. Now, the earliest representation of Christians of a cross is, this is from an archaeologist called David Roll, is the tarot. You can see it looks like a T-shape with the letter of Jesus above the head. Next one, please. Oh, sorry, but that doesn't really fit with the Gospels, does it? Because above his head they placed the words, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." So we need the titulus crucis, so a T-shaped cross is not necessarily going to work. Next one. There's also the Christogram, which is like a psalter, you know what I'm talking about. And this is found in the catacombs as a means of telling the story, but also using the letters of Christ's name. Next one, please. I want to ask a few questions. Why is there a hematoma on the back of the hand? Have a look at the size of the hematoma on the back of the hand in the 3D imaging. Now, if the hand was compressed against the crossbeam in a classical crucifixion, a hematoma would not form there because it would be compressed. Yeah? With a penetration injury, unless you hit an artery or a vein, you don't get much blood flow. You get the blood flow, but blood will seep in around the injury, and then when the penetrating object is removed, it will flow down. Next one, please. Also, why are the marks of the whip not smudged down the back? If Jesus' back was against a cross in the classical crucifixion method, why they're smudged across the shoulders, but they're really not smudged down the centre of the back? Why? Next one, please. And what was the angle of the arms of crucifixion and the blood flow? Next one, please. Now, a 45 to 55 degree angle would not lead to the blood flow down the arms. This is just gravity. Blood would fall down to the ground from this way. It wouldn't go down the arms. Next one. And of course, Matteo Barini and Luigi Garascelli have tried to show that in a video where they show blood being shown at lots of different angles. And the way to make it work that consistent with the shroud, next one please, is vertical. Next one please. Now I tried to show you what this might look like. I created with ChatGPT an image of the crucifixion. This is a classical image of the crucifixion. But I want you to imagine for a moment that the crucifixion, next one please. Imagine for a moment the crucifixion from the back. And I know it's a big stretch, but imagine for a moment that the entry point for the nail is the back of the hand and not the palm. Okay, next one. And the next one. And that the angle of the arms is vertical. Sorry, that's not anatomically beautiful, I'm afraid. Next one, please. So where I'm coming to is the possibility of a yoke crucifixion, that the arms of Jesus are behind the crossbeam, the patibellum that he carried. Again, this is the Station of the Cross. Next one, please. So this is what it would look like in a yoke crucifixion, with the hands behind the crossbeam, the arms vertical. Next one, please. There are other reasons to consider for this. Is she here? Is Barbara here? Yay! Major in the American Army. And I was talking to her over breakfast this morning. Soldiers don't restrain from the front. Because if you restrain from the front, you could get punched or kicked or spat on or bitten. They restrain from the back. If Jesus was crucified in a yoke crucifixion, the soldier putting the nail through the back of his hand wouldn't even need to look at his face. Next one, please. Why does this matter? Have a listen to this passage. You've heard it at Christmas every year. Have a listen to it in context of the crucifixion. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. A light has dawned. We think the shroud was created by light, radiation, some form. And then it goes on, for as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. Now, I think this is a prophecy of the shroud, in the sense that it is a garment rolled in blood. I think it's possible that the belt of blood is because as they positioned the body, blood flowed out as they rolled it, to tie the feet together and bind the body round. Will be destined for the fire. Well, we've already looked at the fire damage on the shroud. Have a look at the next bit. Next slide, please. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Next, please. Jesus said, come to me, you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Next one, please. If Jesus carried the cross in a yoke crucifixion, he broke the yoke of sin and death, the yoke of burden and oppression, and he offers his followers a different yoke, where they may still be suffering, but there's also freedom, liberation, restoration, salvation. Next one, please. The sudarium, which you just heard about recently, now that the head needs to be next to the arm for the sudarium because it couldn't go all the way around the head. Next one, please. Now, after death, the arms would extend with the weight of the body and slump down, and you get this head on the right-hand side, and you can't get the sudarium round. Okay, so I tried to create an image of what this might look like on a tree. Next one, please. So here is possible, you get the Cairo, which we talked about earlier, which is the shape of the olive tree. You get the crossbeam supported on the tree. Next one, please. With the titulus crucis, it becomes the Tauro, a T-shaped cross. Next one, please. This is the back. There's no compression of the back against the back of because it's free. So the marks of the whip aren't compressed because they're not actually attached to something. Next one, please. And maybe the nakedness was not so apparent if part of the cross was in front. This is very contentious, but it would have been much, much, much more painful. Next one. The marks of the whip, this is the right layer, the front of the body and the back of the body. Have a look at the whiplashes. Which are the most smudged? Next one, please. And why are the ventral toes missing? This is what I really wanted to get back to with Cranash. Why are the ventral toes? Now, I've taught for years that they put the cloth down on the tomb, they put the body on it, they lift it over and, oops, it's not long enough. But never mind. Do you believe that? Do you believe that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords could not find a cloth that was big enough? That St. Mary left her son with his toes exposed, with his blood out? Do we believe this? Next one, please. Okay, so why are the two corners missing? I've argued for years this is damage from water and bacteria following the fire in 1532. But they folded the shroud down the centre first. Do you remember I said that normally they fold it this way? This time they fold it down the centre. The two missing corners are then next to one another. So have a look again. Next one, please. This is the ventral damage. If you look carefully at the water damage, it's more carbonated on the front than it is on the back. You can see it matches the missing corners. Next one, please. This is the back. This is much more difficult to see, but there is water damage that matches the same height as the missing corner. And if you look above the missing corner, you can see what looks like mould damage. Next one, please. This is the cutting of the carbon date. I need to hurry up here. You can see that it's orange. And this is interesting, right? This is the backing cloth. This is two different colours. The backing cloth is clear here, it's orange here. This is dyed. And the shroud is the same colour as the dye. Next one, please. This is more detailed. You can see it's obvious that the shroud is the same colour as this artificial colour here. Next one. Now, Dr. Ray Rogers, this is the thread of thread 14, and he used 6N hydrochloric acid to get rid of it. And you can see he's got rid of the dye, which he identified as madder root dye. Next one, please. Next one. Sorry. This is Oxford University. I put a freedom of information request on Oxford University. This is their photo. It's orange. It's orange, and there's a whole load of gum all over it. Next one, please. This is Mark Evans. Compare the two. One's orange. This is the natural colour of the shroud. These are the fibres which contain the image. This is dyed. Next one, too. So were the toes once there? Let's go back to the Lier shroud with Lucas Cranach the Elder. Next one, please. Okay, this is... It's a fairly good representation, but there are some flaws. You can see that he's not quite got the angle of the hands right. He's got the marks of the burns very clearly, but he hasn't got the angle of the hands quite right. Now, this is a problem, in my opinion, for medievalists, because if this is what a Renaissance grandmaster could do, if this is what an equivalent of Michelangelo or Leonardo could do, then how on earth did someone in the age of Giotto begin to create the shroud? Next one, please. Okay, this is the ventral toes in detail from Cranach, and you can see that he's drawn the big toe beautifully. There's 5 toes. You can see this is, I think, the left foot covering the right foot. Let's compare it with what you can see on the shroud now. Next one, please. This is what we can see now. Just a pool of blood to the front of the foot. There's no toes. And so we either decide that Cranach made this up, that it wasn't there originally, that he just made this up, or we decide that something happened quite drastic to the shroud following the fire. And I would argue for the latter, because I think this is too clever. You can see he's drawn the heels really beautifully on both feet. Next one, please. This is the back of the feet from Cranach. These images are they're not particularly clear, but I hope you can get the idea. Beautiful back, big toe drawn here, and the smaller toes going down. Next one, please, if you could. Yeah, now if you compare it with the shroud, you can see that he's, again, not quite got the angle of the feet, but it's not bad. And what's really interesting is that you can see the blood flow to the centre of the foot, but you can see the heel really clearly on this foot, and compare that to the blood flow that's coming out of the side here. I think it's very possible that the blood flow is coming sideways from the heel, possibly from both heels. And why is it important? Because archaeologically we know that that's likely. They found the remains of 2 people who were crucified. Both of them had the nail sideways to the feet. Next one, please. Okay, I want to talk about this. How long was the shroud originally? So if we take Cranach's argument, well, I'm trying to argue that there were originally toes, that if we'd have gone to see the shroud in 1516, we'd have seen toes on the front of the feet. How long was it? So this is an artist's view of the Jewish tabernacle. Anyone who's at Mass today, what a wonderful reading. We just heard about the Jewish tabernacle. This is an artistic impression of the Jewish tabernacle. Next one, please. Now, these are the dimensions of the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. You can see that where the Ark of the Covenant was, the size is 10 cubits by 10 cubits. That was very specific. They did it in the wilderness. They did it in the Temple of Solomon, and they did it in the Temple of Herod. Next one, please. So what's the dimensions of a cubit? Well, a cubit is from the elbow to the tip of the finger, and it's traditionally 18 inches or 45 centimetres. And the Old Testament prophets were really clear that you had to not shortchange people with measurements. So 10 cubits would be 180 inches or 4.5 metres. And the shroud is 14 foot 5 inches, 4.4 metres. What I'm trying to argue is that maybe it was originally 7 inches longer, 17 centimetres longer. Next one, please. Next one, sorry. Okay, now the radiocarbon date. This is the carbon date area. You all know it, really familiar. This is not an area that should have been carbon dated if what I'm saying is possibly true. You're looking at massive bacterial damage which led to the cut-off of that corner, which would have implied the need for some form of disinfectant, which would have introduced potentially cotton along with the disinfectant in the cleaning process. You know, it's just, and Joe and Sue and Ray have argued that, you know, this is a repaired fragment, dyed, madder root dyed, gum tragacanth. And I think you can see just by looking at it that it isn't the same colour as the rest of the shroud. And I think they tried to make it look like it was fire damage. It's the same colour as the fire damage. They were so embarrassed. It's one thing to have almost destroyed the shroud by letting it catch fire. It's another thing to let it go mouldy. That's my opinion anyway. You know, so let's make it look like it was fire. They don't do it on the back because the carbonisation of the area isn't as bad on the back. Next one, please. The spear wound, I've just got a few more minutes, if that's all right, to talk about the spear wound. So you can see the spear wound where it comes and where it comes out in the belt of blood. Next one, please. Eucharistic of teachings of St. John. Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Next one, please. Now, I talked about the Eucharistic miracles at Ancaster. I'm not going to go there today. But, you know, Lanciana, at the conference I've just been in, there was a whole corridor of all the Eucharistic miracles, and Carlos Acutis. Next one, please. One of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water flowed out, with pleural effusion, pericardial effusion. There is a serum, isn't there, around the blood flows. Next one, please. This is what I want to talk about. Jesus, this is a prophecy from Ezekiel. You perhaps remember it from hearing it over the years. Then he brought me back to the entrance of the temple, and I beheld water flowing eastward from under the threshold of the temple, and the temple faced east. The water was flowing from down under the southern end of the temple, south of the altar. Okay, and I don't know if you remember it, but he goes out and he measures it. The water comes up to his ankles, and then he goes and it measures. The water comes up to his knees, and so it goes on. This huge water that's flowing from the temple of God. Next one, please. Jesus identified himself as the temple. The Jews then challenged him, what sign can you give us to justify what you're doing this? Jesus answered, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. But the temple he was talking about was the temple of his body. Next one, please. And this is what he says in St. John. On the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood up and called out in a loud voice, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, streams of water will flow from within him. He was speaking about the Spirit, who those believed in him were later to receive. The next one, please. Now, if you look at the prophecy from Ezekiel in the Hebrew, what you get is this. From under the side of the temple, right south of the altar. Right south of the altar. Remember I told you that a Hebrew scholar walked past when I was talking about Shin? Well, she looked it up. Yes, it's there, the word right. Why is that significant? Next slide, please. Well, this is the first image of the crucifixion, showing the right-sided spear wound from the Rebolo Gospel. And you can see the soldier on the right piercing his right side and the sponge being offered on the left. So they knew very, very early on that the spear wound is in the right side. Next one, please. Heaven. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the street. The leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will have no more need for light for the lamp from the sun. I think it goes on to say for the sun. Can you read that? Can you see what it says on the? How does the text end? Do you mind, David? Do you mind how?
Gospel of Luke.
Yeah. Well, this is Revelation. It's Revelation. Yeah. So what's he talking about here? He's talking about the water in heaven flowing from the throne of God and from the Lamb. In Ezekiel, it's from the right side of the temple that this water flows. And it's for the healing of the nations. And then it goes on, they will see his face and his name will be on their foreheads. And there will be no more need for light, because the Son himself, God, will provide light. We've seen the light of the Shroud of Turin. Okay, next slide, please. And that's me. So I've talked about the colourblind image. There is no racism that can ever be applied to the Shroud of Turin. That he is naked and yet without shame. That we should turn the other cheek, because that's the teaching of Jesus. If someone hits you on the right cheek, offer the other. The world is torn apart by war. We need a prophetic means of teaching the teachings of Jesus. The nature of the whiplashes all over the body. The crucifixion, the position of the arms. How was it? The possibility of a yoke crucifixion with the entry for the nail through the back of the hands rather than through the front. And the significance of that spiritually. The wounds to the feet. Was the shroud once 10 cubits? Was it once just a little bit longer? And because of water damage, that's been removed. And the spear wound. The water and the blood that flowed from the side of Christ. That brings life, that brings healing to the nations. Now, the purpose of my exhibition is to try and tell people that Jesus loves you. And I hope that you can recognise from the extent of the injuries, the extent of the agony of medial nerve damage, just how much it cost him to save you. And I hope you've got a glimpse of heaven, a glimpse that there is life beyond the grave, that he is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.
So any questions?
Yes, we have an orthopedic surgeon here.
There we go.
Tim.
I want to commend you. I've been doing Passion and Crucifixion talks for about 10 years, just from a medical standpoint. And I'll read again and again and again. The thumb is in because of median nerve damage. The adductor pollicis, the muscle that brings the thumb in, has ulnar nerve innervation, the funny bone nerve that comes through this part of the wrist, not the carpal tunnel. So you're right, median nerve injury does not explain the thumb coming into the palm. So
Okay.
Thank you for that.
No, thank you. And what about, can I just ask you about the feet?
Yes, with the feet. This was, we had this short conversation just before you spoke. At John Jackson's talk just before lunch today, I've been of the opinion, based upon the Yehohanan
Yes.
and Fenstanton and the Po Valley findings, of the holes, of the nails or holes in the calcaneus, the heel bone, from lateral to medial, outside to inside, or inside to outside.
Yeah.
And you can tell where the entry point is or the exit point is, because the diameter of the hole in the Po Valley calcaneus is bigger on the inner side than it is on the outside. Anyway, after seeing that kind of information and putting myself in the place of a Roman legionnaire, I want, and I'm a surgeon, I want it quick, I want it efficient, and I want it reliable. And it's much easier to put a nail into the calcaneus, which is a flat surface, and to try to put it through 2 feet that are bloody on top of each other, and blood is very slippery. And trying to hold that together. But looking at listening to John's talk this morning, and the blood pattern on the shroud with the feet, I'm very open to that idea. A nail through the right foot, top to bottom, and the left foot in kind of a frog leg position. So the nail goes through the calcaneus on the left foot, in through the right foot, top to bottom. That's going to take a little bit more thinking. But otherwise, I was of the mind that the feet were nailed to the stipes on both sides of the stipes this way.
Sideways
this
to the
way.
heels.
2 nails, 2 feet.
I think there is, I mean, if you look carefully at the blood on the back, I think there is definitely a flow, I would say, from both heels, as well as a flow. So I'm talking about multiple nails.
I hope so, because then I wouldn't have to change my mind. Thank you.
Question.
But also, if you there's an Old Testament scripture that talks about the mortal agony of my bones. In order to breathe in crucifixion, obviously, you have to keep lifting yourself up. Again, so to lift yourself up with the nail through a heel, excruciatingly painful.
Just a further confirmation of two of the points that you said, and an echo of what was just said. Dr. Zujibe cites himself and 3 other doctors that injury to the medial nerve does not bring the thumb in. Yeah. And people have been trying to combat this forever. He tried to combat this forever. So I'm glad that you brought that out. And then in his crucifixion experiments, he showed that a crucified man, the weight of his torso is forward of the weight for where the hands and the feet are suspended, and it causes a moment or a rotation where the back is not against the cross. So there would be no smudging of those wounds on the back that you would mention.
That's possible, but I think the smudging, but I don't think there's much all the way down the back of the body, but I'm prepared to, yeah. I suppose it depends on how literally we take the idea, the images of how, I think in my next talk I've got a picture of a crucifixion as a cross as we would recognise it today, which is like 5th century, 6th century. So what the cross looked like evolved over time. Do you know what I mean? So it's trying to get back to what it would have been like.
Yes, so can you clarify what you think did cause the, can you clarify what did cause then the pulled in thumb?
I think what I just saw today, that's very good.
Okay.
I think something had to hold in there, because normally in the body, the muscles will keep it in this position, what we call the functional position, the resting position. Just put your hand down limp, it'll rest like that.
And so then it would be rigor mortis, and we keep it there if it was.
No, I think.
So can I answer that from so So I worked with an undertaker for quite a while to try and understand, after Andy said to me that this doesn't, it doesn't cause me. And what the undertaker told me was that in a coffin burial, the weight of the arms will be held in place by the wood of the coffin. In a shroud burial, that's not true. Because obviously rigor mortis sets in tightly at about 8 hours post-death. So at the point where they buried Jesus, his body wouldn't still have been flexible, and so the weight of the hands, if you don't tie them together, would pull. And then we would have a naked view of Jesus, and I think that's not. And it would be a very difficult image to view. Yeah, but if you tie, and I've spoken to a lot, as I say, a Coptic doctor who said this is what we do, and I've certainly read that in Jewish literature, that they tie the hands together to keep this line of the body and to give protection and dignity.
Any other questions? Got a couple minutes yet.
Oh,
I hate to do this to you, but if you can hear me.
have you got the microphone for you? Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Guy. I'm trying to get the size of the shroud. It's 10 cubits by 10 cubits.
No, just 10 cubits long, but the width would stay the same.
Oh,
but 10 cubits long as well. I'm just trying to argue. And it may not be, but it's just too much, like we had at the Mass today, the Holy of Holies was there to protect the Ark of the Covenant, which is where the sins of people were forgiven. It's where God met with Moses, where God met with the priests, and the blood of oxen was shed on it to atone for the sins of the people on the Day of Atonement. So I think I think they would have wanted it. Joseph Arimathea knew how tall Jesus was. Why did he choose a cloth that wasn't big enough?
But it's still with 2 cubits.
Yeah, sure. And the width is the same. I'm just talking about the length.
Would that follow the pattern of the town house that you would?
No, I don't think
But
so.
at least it would attend part of that
Yes.
typology. Okay, good.
Well, Pam, I do have a question.
Go on then, go.
And since I have the mic, I can ask it.
Oh.
At the bottom of the shroud here shown, the
Yeah.
cloth cut is not straight, it's at a curve there.
Which one? Here?
Yeah, on the left bottom there. I think it was that one. On one of your images anyway, it was curved up. Do you think that's caused then by the warping of it being wet? Or do you think it was actually then recut and then it got wet again and then therefore it got shorter there or something?
I personally think that you can work out the folding patterns for the water damage. So, you can see that this is from the fire where they put the water on to put the fire out. But like I said before, whenever I fold my backing cloth, the only time I ever fold it straight down the middle here is to dry it over a height. Now the fire happened in Chambray in 1532 in December. The humidity in Chambray at that time was in excess of 90%. They weren't going to put it anywhere near a fire. And linen can hold 20% of its weight in water and feel dry to the touch. So I think they put it away, stored it, and when they got it out, this, and probably beyond there, was so badly contaminated they couldn't keep it. That would be my hypothesis, and it may be wrong. But Lucas Grenache the Elder, and I do think he did the layer shroud, I certainly saw the shroud, without any question, and he would draw toes and more material beyond the toes than was currently there. I did speak to a guy who holds the Savoy records, and he said that there was evidence in the Savoy records that there was more material beyond the feet in the Savoy records, but I can't track it down on him on that. Yes, sure.
So Pam, not to plug my own talk this evening, but
Yeah.
I am going to be talking about the Lear Shroud copy
Yay!
that's been first commissioned. What is your thought about Albrecht Dürer perhaps being the artist there?
It's not-
Because it's Nuremberg dialect.
So is Grenache.
Okay, so it's Grenache, okay?
Grenache, his writing, he often wrote on things, and he came from Bavaria. So it's consistent. It isn't Dürer's signature.
Yep,
But
right, that's right.
I think that the German, like there's another one, there's a very, very graphic crucifixion. The German painters of the time had a much better acknowledgement of the extent of the whiplashes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pam. That was wonderful. Fantastic.